Welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit about and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello.
How are you doing this week?
I'm doing fine. I'm feeling inspired and fresh and ready to go.
Is any
Listener,
of that true?
I'm not.
Good. So we're off to a cracking start. Well, this week we are going to plod on through with the Beatles, which means we're covering the second song, which means we are talking about All I've Got to Do and all those various harmonies therein. So, how is this one?
Right, okay. So let's start here with the disclaimer. If anyone has managed to listen to more than about two of these, they'll probably be aware that I'm not the biggest fan of John Lennon's singing voice. However, this is another one on which I think he does a cracking job. I think there's a really good vocal here, and I know you made the little dig, the slight dig about the harmonisation, but I think all round it really works on this. There's a lot going for it. I'm going to go as far to say that I think this is a vastly underrated Beatles track.
It wasn't a dig. I actually like the harmonies on this, but they are very much a standout feature of the track. I sort of more or less agree with all of that. I think that this is a really strong performance and a really unusually vulnerable performance for Lennon at this stage in his career. And that really helps to kind of sell the lyric. The lyric isn't the most sophisticated in the world, but it does avoid a lot of kind of classic Lennon pitfalls. It doesn't feel possessive in the way that we've sometimes talked about before. And it feels like a lyric that he's really getting behind as well. So he's being prepared to make himself seem vulnerable in a way that isn't that common for Lennon at this stage in his career. I think it turns into an absolutely terrific vocal. And I must be honest, I'd kind of forgotten about this song when we started this. It's definitely one that didn't really click particularly when we got to it. But I think you're right. I think it kind of is underrated, or at least it certainly is in my own sort of pantheon of Beatles appreciation. This is pretty good stuff.
It is, absolutely. I think the lyric point is a really interesting one, because the lyrics contrast with the title. Okay, so point in case. All I've got to do. Nice and formal, straightforward. You actually listen to what he's singing though, and it's a lot of wannnas and gotters in there. All I gotta do. He doesn't sound, there's no way is he enunciating all I've got to do. So I find it intriguing that the title is All I've Got to Do, as though someone has insisted that no, you must write that formally. We are English after all.
Well, I think that is the contrast. I think the All I've Got to Do does make it sound like the song has been written by an English group, but the wannnas and gottas and all that kind of stuff makes it sound kind of very Americanized. It's very slang, and I know we'll have a bit of a discussion about this and the whole kind of Smokey Robinson influence. But yeah, all that kind of stuff, the gottas and the these little Americanisms which are coming in, feel of a piece of the music. I think it fits the music much better than if it was more kind of formally written out. But yeah, there's unquestionably a contrast there.
And while we're on the lyrics, I don't know if you recall. Think all those years ago to your childhood. How many telephones did you have in the house growing up?
How many
telephones?
Two.
You had two.
Yeah.
Wow, so middle class.
Right?
Presumably one was in the hallway.
One was in the hallway and one was in my parents' bedroom.
Oh, hello. Right, okay, so you can never be sure if they were listening in.
Always best to be careful.
Yeah, it's safe to assume, isn't it? I mean, a lot of us over here would have grown up with, a telephone in the hallway. I mean, we're talking 70s and 80s, but then actually, even thinking back, I know from talking to my parents about it, even in the 70s, not every house would have had its own telephone at that point. It's something that came in a bit later in that decade. So I quite like the idea that all he's got to do is call you on the phone and you'll come running home. That's good. Don't think that a lot of people in Britain would have gone, oh, right, okay, telephone? I got one of them. But I did read somewhere that it was suggestion is that this is written very much for the American market, and that reference would seem to make that suggestion.
Yeah, Lennon mentioned that in an interview that he had sort of specifically written it for the American market, and I think that does really come through in all kind of aspects of the song. So the music does feel very very much of that kind of Smokey Robinson style. The lyric is hanging on to that. The delivery is hanging on to that. The harmonies kind of come from a lot of the, the stuff that we've talked about before in terms of girl groups, in terms of, these kind of quite sophisticated harmonies, quite well put together. If I had an adjective for this song, it might well be sophisticated. I think this is quite a sophisticated piece of writing by kind of early Beatles standards. Yeah. And, I think the Americanisms do very much come through. The phone thing, I suppose, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
I think that sophistication also comes across in the structure of the song, because it's not really a verse, chorus kind of song, but what you get instead is that up-tempo section part the way through, and the same goes for me, Whenever You Want Me At All. And it doesn't really kind of lift it in the way that a chorus traditionally would, but it just seems like they're putting something in that's a little bit different to anything else that their competitors are going to do. So look at us, we're playing with form, we're playing with rhythm, we're playing with tempo, and we're giving you something that is kind of like building to a little climax within the song before then dropping the mood again. And I really like it. For me, that stands out from a lot of the other songs that they've written so far. It feels like there's that increasing maturity that we spoke about on the last podcast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, the structure of the song is basically verse, middle eight, and we're done. That's pretty much the structure of it. And although the All I Gotta Do's kind of function the way as a chorus would, it gives a little bit of release from the kind of the tension of the verses. It's still not like a traditional chorus in any sense of the word, and it is quite different when you compare it to not just a lot of the contemporaries, but a lot of the other songs that we've covered. It does have a confidence about it that they can pull this off. That it's not a song which is shy about putting forward the best elements of the group. And I mean, particularly, we've talked about the vocal and the lyric, but you mentioned the tempo. It's my Ringo moment, but he's great on this song. He's getting all the offbeats, all that stuff, which again comes from a lot of kind of like the Temptations, the Miracles, a lot of that kind of style, but it's also very distinctively him as well. It's a really impressive performance from Ringo, but it's very much kind of downplayed. It's not emphasized in the track as well, and if anything, that kind of makes me appreciate it even more. It's not flashy, it's not a big standout, but it's exactly the scaffolding that the rest of the song needs to be built around.
Do you think that that sort of state, I wrote down the phrase conscious competence, which I think is what it is. It's very much them being aware of what they're doing at this stage. They're not just sort of plucking them from the ether, they're really working on doing this deliberately. But that sort of almost conscious, understated element of it, even down to the way that the song finishes, could be a reason why it was never played live.
I mean, I think it could be, yeah. I definitely think there's some wisdom in that, some truth to that. I think also, you mentioned this, I think, in the last episode as well, just the sheer rate that they were churning out songs. Not everything's going to make it on stage. But I think that underplayed element of it is also what lends its kind of emotional impact, because it is a bit kind of downbeat, particularly on the verses, and that slight understatement also gives it a little bit more kind of emotional power, a little bit more of an emotional push to it. I think it's deeply effective. I kind of regret that this is one of the songs that hasn't been played live, because I would kind of love to hear them, how they could manage this on stage. It's not a really difficult song. It's the usual kind of half dozen chords, but they're assembled in such a way that there's real, strength to that construct, and it would be great to hear them do it live. There's a version of this song on Spotify by Susanna Hoffs of the Bangles, which is kind of interesting to listen to in comparison, simply because it's another one of those tracks whereby it's performed almost exactly the same way as the Beatles version. There's very little interpretation of the song, so it's got the same offbeat, it's got the same rhythm. It's more or less just played straight. But again, the Beatles just have that unbelievable ability to make their competence sound effortless. Like, there's nothing wrong with the Susanna Hoffs version. It's perfectly competent. She's got good vocal, but like her band just can't deliver in the same way at all. It's really average. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing right with it either. It simply exists as 2.5 minutes of music. Whereas there's something, that effortlessness, that effortless capturing of the style and the cadence and the mood and the rhythm that they're going for. It's just there. It's such a talent, and it looks like nothing at all.
It's interesting that effectively the song's life ends in November '63 when the album's released.
Yeah,
the Beatles, played it in was it September when it was recorded. They might have played it a little bit in rehearsal before then to get the hang of it, but after the 11th of September 1963, they conceivably never played it again. Probably rarely thought about it. I don't think it comes up in any of the Get Back recordings, does it? It's not one of the ones that they revisit. And it just seems sad that something that's a little gem in some ways just dies a little, other than for some of the people who would listen to it and like us, I suppose, keeping the flame alive. Because it's really good. And okay, so I'm kind of struggling to really get too excited about this, because it's a really good song, but it's not one of the sort of the standout songs. It's pretty good, and I just keep sort of shrugging my shoulders every so often, going, it's pretty good, like I'm on a loop. But it's hard to kind of drill down and actually sort of tease out what it is, other than it's pretty good. Just like stuck on a loop.
Well, I think also, we've talked a little bit about sort of stylistic pastiche before on the podcast, and it is that thing. It's interesting also, I think, because it's usually McCartney that does the kind of stylistic pastiche. He's very, very good at that. In fact, I would go so far as to say it's one of his kind of key skills. As a musician and as a songwriter, he's very good at being able to adapt to almost any kind of style or genre. And it's not that common that Lennon does the same thing. This is very, very clearly, a Lennon song. Everything about it just screams John Lennon. But the fact that it is that kind of pastiche in style, maybe it's pastiche is too strong. I don't mean that to sound sort of condemnatory, but it's very clearly aping a specific style. And that's not that common for Lennon. Lennon tends to write John Lennon songs and not necessarily a lot else for good and ill. But here we really see him stretching himself. I know in the Ian MacDonald book, it's this is compared to "Depend on Me," the Smokey Robinson song. Listen to that before we recorded as well. It's not their finest moment, I think it's fair to say. It's really kind of cheesy and treacly and not great. But some of the influence does come through, particularly that first kind of opening chord, which is just strummed once and then the song starts. That's very clearly a direct lift. And the lyric is sort of vaguely similar. I have to say, All I've Got to Do is a far, far better song. It's a better performance and it's much better written. So in this case, it's not just stylistic pastiche. It's actually taking something in a specific style and doing it better than the thing that he's lifting from. I'm not saying that they're always going to be better in doing this style than Smokey Robinson, but in this particular case, that's not really like Smokey Robinson's best song, and Lennon kind of taking lifts and doing something different with similar material is actually improving on the original, which is, again, that's not nothing. And for Lennon, it's really unusual to see him operating in that kind of way, which again I think just makes this all the more kind of an interesting little gem, as you say.
Okay, so there's two things based on what you've just said. Firstly, I'd say it's probably got more in common with You've Really Got a Hold on Me. I think there's echoes there. It's like it's an up-tempo version of that, but then the Beatles always write fast songs in the main. It's amazing how often that comes up. Secondly, you were unhappy with pastiche. You thought pastiche was unfair, so you went for aping instead.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a perfect synonym, but I was trying to find a different way of expressing the same thing. I'm sure if I concentrate hard, I'll come up with a better synonym.
I would say that
than
aping is worse than pastiche.
Yeah, I suspect you're probably
Yeah,
right.
okay.
There.
I
All
just
right.
wanted to see whether or not that was the Lennon estate should be in touch any time now.
Well, if Yoko wants to give us a call, she's more than welcome to. I would happily have a conversation with her about my choice of vocabulary.
I would imagine, ironically, she's probably got corporations who do that for her.
I suspect that might well be the case.
Yeah, take that, Yoko.
Yeah,
yeah. That'll bring down your empire. Yeah. Anyway, Yoko at this stage is not even a glint in Lennon's eye.
No,
because this is, I mean, I suppose actually that's sort of a relevant point, because of course this is a Lennon for whom art is things like Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. That sort of other level of consciousness that he taps into later is still something that is kind of lurking in the background with his old art school understanding, but it's not really something that's driving his own art in a way.
Maybe. I mean, the fact that he's prepared to take this kind of music and be influenced by it and write in that kind of style, maybe that's a better way of saying it. He writes in the style of, that's better than both aping and pastiching. The fact that he's prepared to do that does sort of indicate that he is maintaining that very kind of open mind. There isn't, and again, please feel free, listeners, to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there isn't, as far as I know, a Jerry and the Pacemakers song that sounds a bit like Smokey Robinson. There isn't going to be a Dave Clark 5 song which sounds a bit like The Temptations or whatever. So, there is still that kind of very open-minded and sort of approach to absorbing and very much in inverted commas here, art, whether that art is music or literature or painting or photography, obviously from the Hamburg days, there's a lot that Lennon can incorporate into that, and doing it in such an explicit and such a specific style like this still stands out. We'll get to You Really Got a Hold on Me later on in this album, of course. But it will be interesting to do a compare and contrast with that song and this one when we get to the real deal, when we're actually talking about a Smokey Robinson song.
Okay, so there's two things on that again. Okay, so I think firstly, the album came out in November 63, and November 66 is when Lennon met Yoko for the first time. So actually, again, it's another one of those indications, isn't it, of the acceleration of their lives, that it's only another 3 years before everything for him changes, almost totally and utterly. And the second thing is, it's really a good sign that it's a decent enough song, but we're struggling for things to say about this now. I mean, I will bring it back to the song in the sense that that it is worth mentioning the fade out, because the fade out is in itself another really good and yet understated element of the song. It's mostly sort of instrumental, and if I'm right in thinking it's Lennon effectively humming over the top.
I think I'm right when I say it's Lennon and McCartney humming and harmonizing over the top.
Yeah. So it's not as though this, repeat chorus ad infinitum. It's not like we're getting 3 million Hey Judes while this is going on. This is subtle. This is, saying, well, okay, all right, fair enough. You've had the best part of the song. We're just going to leave you with that now. That's perfectly okay, and I like that.
I do as well. And the humming is I kind of warm to that as well. There's something quite nice about it, and it's very unusual. I can't think of another example of a Beatles song which has that in it. And maybe there is one, but I can't immediately pull one to mind.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that there will be those who will see it as a lack of imagination. Oh, we couldn't think anything else to put in there. But it's nice not to have one of those endings like last week's one or the last episode, where you can imagine them bowing at the end. Which on quite a lot of them you can. As fine as the songs may be, it's a little bit of a problem. So it won't be long. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Till I belong to you and bow. Great song. I really like it. Won't be long. But I like the fact that this just takes us out in a different way and shows us a slightly different side to what they're trying to do.
Well, the fade, I think, also is something that works very well for kind of the emotion of the song. It's not the whole thing is it's this kind of the lyric for all that it's not the deepest ever. It's this kind of I want to be with you, you want to be with me, but it's an ongoing thing. And so having the song fade out at the end rather than come to a clean stop implies that kind of ongoing nature of the relationship, if that's not too much of an overread. But it fits the cadence of the song. Emotionally, it dissipates the energy which has been brought up in the song. That whole moment in the middle eight, where you get you just gotta color me, and it's got a real kind of power to it, and then the song kind of pushes itself back down into that kind of original register again, and then we get to the fade with the hums. It provides a nice kind of sort of musical geometry, if that's not too awful an expression, to guide the listener kind of through that part of the song and then back out as the song fades out. I think you're right, it is understated, but it's really effective in the way that it kind of leads the listener down the garden path and sort of follows that sort of emotional arc.
So, okay, guess how many things I've got?
Oh, is it somewhere between 1 and 3?
Well, first things first, folks. Listeners, you've been treated to both of us having a go at singing in this episode. And the second one is, sitting there listening to you at the start of that, for some reason just popped into my head that moment in Hitchhikers where they're doing the TV report when Seyfarth has stolen the... or what's it called? The Heart of Gold?
Heart of Gold, I think.
Yeah. And they cut to his shrink who says, "Oh, Zephar's just this guy, And I'm thinking, yeah. I just struggle to over intellectualize this song, and I think that's it makes for a very strange discussion, doesn't it?
Okay. Yes.
It's just this song,
Yeah, it's just a song. All right. Before we get into any more comedy accents, shall we give this song a score and wrap things up?
Oh well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this whole score thing.
Yes, you do.
No. Well, I mean, it's fine if I want to equate it to it won't be long.
Yeah.
Then I'd say it's probably on a par or maybe a little bit better. I noticed on the old Google sheet you've been giving some old half marks to hedge your bets slightly. I think that's not in the spirit, really, is it?
Really? You don't approve of half marks in the spreadsheet?
I think you need to kind of nail your colours to the mast and say it's either
right.
one thing or another.
I shall have to go back and reconsider my scores then.
Well, then you'll be grateful that the formulas have been put in place for you, wouldn't you? So you don't have to then adjust the totals and the average score yourself. It's all been done for you, Mr. IT man.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a 6 or a 7, isn't it? I mean, it's
I myself would say 6.5, but I'm not allowed to.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's worth having because why just stop at 6.5? Why can't it be like 6.25?
Because it's better than a 6.25.
Okay, but is it not 6 2/3?
I don't think it's quite 6 2/3. I would say it's 6.5, and you can tell that because I said it was 6.5.
What would they have to do to have made it a 6 2/3? Let's give them some feedback.
Okay. What would they have had to have done to make it 6 2/3?
And if you can't, then that makes it a flaw in the whole format.
They could have done a 3-part harmony with George.
Right. Okay. Right. I'll let you have that, but I'll be quizzing you in future weeks.
Okay. So I'm allowed to keep half marks as long as I can justify it.
As long as you can think on your feet and come up with a spurious reason off the top of your head. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Fine. So you're going for a 6 and I'm going for a 6.5.
Hang on, no, I said it's a 6 or a 7. I haven't decided yet.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to preempt your decision there.
I've gone for 7.
Going for 7.
Even though you haven't put the song title in yet.
No, I'll do that in a very short second.
Yeah, but do I trust you? Because for all I know, you'll go and write Mr. Moonlight in, and then you'll protect that area, so I can't edit it. And then suddenly I've given Mr. Moonlight 7 out of 10.
I hadn't thought that, but now you've put an idea in my head. Yeah, if only we'd recorded this in some kind of way, so you could go back and check the honesty of the figures I put in. All right, let's leave it there then. We have a 6.5 and a 7 for this particular song. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @Beatles_ology, and you can find more of my writing at www.jgmcquarrie.scot. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next week, we will be carrying on through with the Beatles, which means we are going to be covering All My Loving. And as always, we hope you can join us for it. But until then, keep listening.